Have you ever noticed how some teenagers can sit across from you at the dinner table every single night, and yet you have absolutely no idea what's going on inside their heads? They eat, they go to school, they scroll on their phones, they answer your questions with a one word response that somehow manages to end an entire conversation. How was school? Fine. Everything okay? Yep. And somehow that's the end of it. Now, here's the part that catches many parents off guard. Some of those teenagers really are fine, but some are carrying stress, anxiety, loneliness, self doubt, or emotional exhaustion that nobody sees. Not their teachers, not their friends, and sometimes not even themselves. As parents, it's easy to assume that mood swings, closed bedroom doors, and sudden attitude changes are just part of growing up. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're clues to something much bigger. Over the years, I've watched parents focus on grades, chores, curfews, and screen time while completely missing the emotional storm happening right under their roof. Today, we're talking about teen mental health, the hidden pressures, the warning signs most parents overlook, and what actually helps when a teenager is struggling. And trust me, some of what we're about to discuss may completely change the way you see your teenager. One of the biggest mistakes adults make is assuming that teenage stress is basically the same stress we had growing up, just with newer technology. It isn't. Today's teenagers are living in an environment where comparison never turns off. When many of us were young, school ended at 3 p.m. You could leave the social hierarchy behind for a few hours. If someone was more popular, more athletic, or getting better grades, you noticed it, but you weren't carrying a glowing reminder of it in your pocket every minute of the day. Now, imagine being 14 and seeing a nonstop stream of classmates who seem happier, prettier, smarter, fitter, wealthier, more talented, and more socially connected than you. Even if those images are carefully curated highlights, the teenage brain often interprets them as reality, and that brain is still under construction. The adolescent brain is especially sensitive to social feedback. Acceptance feels incredibly rewarding. Rejection feels disproportionately painful. A casual comment, an ignored text, or being left out of a group chat can feel devastating in a way adults sometimes underestimate. I've seen parents dismiss these situations with, it's just middle school drama. But to the teenager living it, it isn't drama, it's their entire social world. The pressure comes from multiple directions. Academics. Many teens feel that every test, every grade, and every extracurricular activity is building or destroying their future. They hear constant messages about college admissions, scholarships, careers, and competition. A B on a report card can feel less like a normal setback and more like evidence that they're falling behind. Social identity. Teenagers are trying to answer some enormous questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? What do people think of me? They are experimenting with identity while also desperately wanting acceptance. That combination can be emotionally exhausting. Family expectations. Even loving, supportive parents can unintentionally create pressure. A teen may hear, "We know you can do better," and interpret it as, "You're disappointing us." They may hear, "We're investing so much in your future," and feel terrified of failing. The future. Many teenagers are worrying about things adults often don't realize they're worrying about: college costs, jobs, relationships, climate issues, social conflict, and whether they'll be able to build a stable life. They're carrying questions that would make many adults anxious. A subtle but important point: the pressures don't always arrive as one giant crisis. More often, they accumulate: a difficult class, a friendship conflict, poor sleep, constant comparison online, fear of disappointing people, uncertainty about the future. Each one might seem manageable. Together, they can create a level of emotional strain that leaves a teenager feeling overwhelmed without fully understanding why. That is why a teen who appears lazy or unmotivated may actually be mentally exhausted. They aren't necessarily lacking ambition, they may be carrying more emotional weight than they're able to process. And because many teens don't have the language to describe that weight, it often comes out as irritability, withdrawal, procrastination, or shutting down. Which brings us to the next question. What do anxiety and depression actually look like in teenagers? The answer is often very different from what parents expect. If I asked most parents to picture a teenager with anxiety or depression, many would imagine someone who is obviously sad, crying frequently, or openly talking about their struggles. The problem is that teen mental health rarely presents itself that neatly. In fact, some of the teenagers who are struggling the most can look perfectly normal from the outside. They still go to school, they still laugh at jokes, they still show up for sports practice, they still post pictures online. And because of that, the adults around them assume everything is okay. This is where many parents get caught off guard. Anxiety in teenagers doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. The teen who spends 3 hours obsessing over a homework assignment, the one who panics over a small mistake, the one who constantly asks for reassurance but never seems reassured. Other times, anxiety looks like avoidance. A teen suddenly doesn't want to attend social events. They procrastinate, they miss deadlines, they seem unmotivated. From the outside, it can look like laziness. Inside, they may be battling a mind that is constantly imagining worst case scenarios. Depression can be even more misleading. Many parents expect sadness. What they often get is irritability. The teenager who snaps at everyone. The teenager who seems angry all the time. The teenager who appears to have an attitude problem. Sometimes what looks like defiance is actually emotional pain wearing a disguise. I've watched parents spend months trying to discipline a behavior that was really a symptom. The teenager wasn't trying to be difficult. They were struggling. One of the most overlooked signs is withdrawal. A teenager who once loved spending time with friends suddenly isolates themselves. A teen who used to enjoy hobbies starts losing interest. Activities that once brought excitement now feel like chores. Parents sometimes assume it's a phase. Sometimes it is. But when withdrawal becomes persistent, it deserves attention. Sleep changes are another major clue. Some teenagers begin sleeping far more than usual. Others can't seem to get enough sleep, no matter how much they rest. And some lie awake at night while their minds run a marathon of worries and self-criticism. The result is exhaustion that follows them throughout the day. Then come the grades. Now, not every drop in academic performance is a mental health issue. Teenagers are human. They have off weeks and difficult semesters. But when a student who normally cares about school suddenly stops turning in assignments, misses deadlines, or loses motivation altogether, it's worth looking beyond the report card. Many parents focus on the outcome. What happened to your grades? A more useful question might be, what happened to you? That simple shift can completely change the conversation. Here's something fascinating about the adolescent brain. The parts of the brain responsible for emotion tend to develop earlier than the parts responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. In practical terms, teenagers often experience emotions with tremendous intensity, while still developing the tools needed to manage those emotions effectively. That doesn't mean they're irrational. It means they're navigating powerful feelings with a system that's still being refined. Imagine driving a sports car with a brand new engine, but brakes that are still being upgraded. That's a rough but useful way to think about adolescence. The emotional experiences are real. The reactions are real. The struggles are real. And when adults dismiss them with phrases like, "you'll get over it," or "you're making a big deal out of nothing," teenagers often learn a dangerous lesson. Don't talk about your feelings. Keep it to yourself. Handle it alone. The tragedy is that many teenagers become very skilled at hiding what they're going through. They smile when they're expected to smile. They say they're fine because it's easier than explaining what they're feeling. And that leads directly to one of the biggest problems of all. Sometimes the very parents who care the most accidentally make things worse without realizing it. This is the part that makes many parents uncomfortable. Not because they're bad parents, not because they don't love their children, but because sometimes the habits that come from love, concern, and good intentions are the exact things that push teenagers further into silence. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. A teenager finally decides to open up. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're anxious. Maybe they're feeling overwhelmed and don't even know why. They take a deep breath and say something vulnerable. And within 10 seconds, the parent jumps into problem solving mode. Well, here's what you need to do: just focus on your schoolwork. Stop worrying so much. Have you tried making a schedule? Now, don't misunderstand me. The parent is trying to help, but the teenager often walks away feeling unheard because they weren't necessarily looking for solutions yet. They were looking for understanding. Adults frequently treat emotional conversations like broken appliances. Teen says problem, parent fixes problem. Conversation over. Teenagers don't work that way. In many cases, they need someone to sit with the feeling before trying to eliminate it. Think about the last time you were upset. Imagine sharing your frustration with someone and immediately hearing, "You're overreacting." That's not a big deal. Other people have it worse. Would you feel better? Probably not. You'd probably feel dismissed. Yet parents do this all the time without realizing it. A teenager says they're struggling because they weren't invited somewhere. The parent responds, "That's nothing to be upset about." But to the teenager, it isn't nothing. Remember what we discussed earlier. During adolescence, peer relationships carry enormous emotional weight. Being excluded can genuinely hurt. Dismissing the feeling doesn't remove the pain. It just teaches the teen that talking about it is pointless. Then there's one of the most famous parenting phrases in history: "When I was your age." Now, sometimes sharing personal experiences can be helpful, but many teenagers hear this phrase as the beginning of a competition. They're talking about their struggles. The parent starts talking about theirs. The focus shifts. The teenager concludes, "You don't understand." And just like that, the conversation shuts down. Another common mistake is comparison. Parents might say, "Your sister never had this problem. Your friend seems to handle it fine. Other kids would be grateful for what you have." The intention is usually motivation. The effect is often shame. Comparison rarely inspires emotional growth. More often, it creates resentment, insecurity, or guilt. And guilt is a terrible foundation for healthy communication. Then there's the lecture. Oh, the lecture. Every parent has delivered one. Sometimes I've joked that teenagers can detect an incoming lecture the way weather forecasters detect a hurricane. The moment a conversation turns into a 20-minute speech, many teens mentally leave the room. You can practically see it happen. Their eyes glaze over, their responses become shorter, their emotional walls go up. Not because they hate their parents, because they no longer feel like participants in the conversation. They're just the audience. Psychologists often talk about emotional validation. Now, validation doesn't mean agreeing with everything a teenager says. It doesn't mean approving bad decisions. It doesn't mean lowering expectations. It simply means acknowledging that their feelings are real. A parent can say, "I can see why that upset you. That sounds really frustrating. I understand why you're feeling stressed." Notice what's missing? No judgment, no criticism, no instant solution. Just understanding. And understanding is powerful. Because when teenagers consistently feel misunderstood, they stop sharing. Not immediately, not dramatically, quietly. They begin filtering what they tell you. Then they filter a little more, then a little more. Until one day, parents find themselves wondering why their teenager never talks anymore. The truth is often heartbreaking. The silence didn't appear overnight. It was built conversation by conversation. The good news is that the opposite is true as well. Trust can be built conversation by conversation. So, what have we learned? We've learned that teen mental health isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up as tears, dramatic breakdowns, or obvious cries for help. More often, it hides behind closed bedroom doors, short answers, irritability, declining motivation, changes in sleep, or a teenager who suddenly doesn't seem like themselves anymore. We've also seen that today's teens are carrying pressures many adults never had to navigate at their age: constant comparison, academic expectations, social pressures, uncertainty about the future, and a world that never seems to switch off can create a level of emotional strain that's easy to underestimate. And perhaps most importantly, we've learned that connection matters more than perfection. Teenagers don't need parents who have all the answers. They need parents who are willing to listen, stay curious, and create a space where feelings can be shared without fear of judgment or immediate correction. I'd love to hear from you. What has been the biggest challenge you've faced when trying to understand or communicate with a teenager? Share your experiences in the comments. I read them, and I may personally respond to some of them. If you found this video helpful, please like it, share it with another parent who might need it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. That support helps us continue creating practical, honest conversations about parenting and adolescent psychology. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to a teenager isn't, "I know what to do." It's, "I'm here and I'm listening."